I never thought staying a little late to help out at someone's house would change so much about the way I saw myself or the way I understood other people. That night at Daniel's place began so ordinary. If I had known how it would end, maybe I wouldn't have lingered so long. Or maybe I would have, because sometimes life pushes you into a moment you didn't know you needed. Daniel was my neighbor. We lived on the same street for years, but never more than a polite hello until about 2 months ago when he asked if I could help him with some paperwork for his small furniture business. I worked as an assistant at an office downtown, so numbers and forms were second nature to me. He, on the other hand, was better with tools than with tax forms. He looked almost embarrassed that first time he knocked on my door, holding a pile of crumpled receipts. He was polite, soft-spoken, the kind of man you could sense had been through some things but didn't talk about them. It started with an hour here and there on weekends. He'd offer me coffee, and I'd sit at his kitchen table sorting everything out for him. Over time, our talks grew a little longer. He'd tell me about the clients who'd stiffed him on payments, about how his workshop used to belong to his father, about how quiet the house got since his parents passed. And I'd tell him about my long commute, the way I sometimes felt like I was stuck in a loop, the loneliness that hung around my little rented apartment like a stubborn cloud. There was never anything between us except an odd kind of trust. So when he asked me last Thursday if I could help him organize all the receipts before the tax deadline, I said yes without thinking. I didn't expect it to take all evening. The clock ticked past 9, then 10. The sky outside was black as ink, and still, there were stacks of papers and an old shoebox full of faded invoices. His house was quiet except for the ceiling fan humming above and the occasional creak of wood as he moved from the kitchen to the table, bringing more papers. He kept apologizing for how long it was taking. I told him it was fine. I wasn't in a hurry. Maybe I said it too easily because I wasn't used to being needed. By the time I placed the last paper into a folder, my back ached from leaning forward. I stretched my arms over my head and let out a laugh. "There," I said, "you won't go to jail for bad bookkeeping." Daniel smiled, and there was something about that smile. It wasn't big or flashy. It was tired, grateful, like someone who hadn't smiled in a while. He set a glass of water in front of me and said, "You didn't have to stay this late. I didn't think it would take so long." "I don't mind," I said, sipping. "Besides, it's not like I have big plans on a Thursday night." The living room clock chimed 11. I stood and gathered my things, feeling the weight of sleep pulling at my eyelids. When I reached the door and stepped out into the yard, I noticed something odd. The gate at the end of the driveway was closed, the heavy metal latch drawn tight. I didn't remember it being closed when I arrived. Daniel followed me outside, hands in his pockets. "I'll walk you out," he said. When we reached the gate, he stopped. His voice was calm when he said, "Nobody's coming tonight." Then, with one smooth motion, he turned the latch back into place. The sound of it locking made my heart skip a beat. For a moment, I didn't understand. I just stood there with my bag hanging from my shoulder, staring at him. "Daniel?" I said carefully, unsure if I should be concerned or not. "Why did you lock it?" He looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. I don't like people wandering in. This neighborhood's been strange lately. You'd be surprised who comes around at night." The way he said it wasn't threatening, but it wasn't casual either. I told myself he was just being cautious. Still, the air felt different. The night was warm, but a cool shiver went up my arms. I glanced down the empty street. It was so still, no cars, no barking dogs, nothing but the whisper of leaves in the dark. My car was parked just outside the gate, but it suddenly felt farther away. He must have seen the hesitation on my face, because his tone softened. "I'll open it when you're ready to leave," he said, leaning against the fence post. "You've been here all night helping me. At least let me give you something to eat before you go. You probably skipped dinner." I hadn't realized how hungry I was until he said it. And maybe that's why I nodded instead of insisting I should leave. Or maybe it was the truth in his voice. There was no demand there, just an invitation. So I followed him back up the path to his kitchen. The kitchen lights were warm, casting golden pools across the wooden table. He pulled out some leftovers from the fridge, nothing fancy, just a plate of roasted vegetables and some bread. He heated it up, poured 2 glasses of iced tea, and we sat down again. The tension I'd felt by the gate eased a little as soon as I started eating. Hunger has a way of grounding you. He asked me questions while I ate. About my family. About why I'd moved to this town. About whether I'd always been good with numbers. His voice was low and even, and the quiet house made every word sound more personal. I realized we'd never really talked about me before. I'd always been the listener. It felt strange to have someone focus on my answers. You ever feel like you're invisible? I asked at one point, surprising myself. Like you could disappear and no one would notice? Daniel looked at me, his fork paused in midair. More times than I can count, he said softly. But you showed up tonight, didn't you? And I noticed. I don't know why that made my throat tighten. I looked down at my plate, so he wouldn't see. After we finished eating, he stacked the dishes in the sink and wiped his hands on a towel. I thought he'd open the gate then. Instead, he motioned toward the back porch. You want to sit for a bit? The air's good tonight. I almost said no. I almost told him I had to get up early the next morning. But I followed him again, and we sat on the wooden steps. The backyard stretched out behind the house, a patchwork of grass and flower beds bathed in moonlight. The air smelled faintly of honeysuckle. Somewhere, an owl hooted. For a long time, we didn't talk. We just sat there, listening to the night. And then, slowly, he began to speak, not about business but about himself. About losing both parents in the same year. About running the workshop alone, trying to keep it afloat when most people wanted factory-made furniture now. About how the house was too big and too quiet most days. His voice was steady, but I could hear the weight behind it. It's strange how someone else's loneliness can make you see your own. By the time he stopped talking, I felt like we weren't just neighbors anymore. We were two people who had been carrying silence for too long. I should go, I whispered finally, because the clock inside the house must have been nearing midnight by then. He stood up and nodded, leading me back to the gate. This time, he unlocked it right away, swinging it open without a word. As I stepped through, I turned to him. Daniel, I said, hesitating. Thank you for dinner.
Thank you, he said.
For staying. The drive home was quiet, but my mind wasn't. All night, I kept replaying that moment by the gate, his voice saying, "Nobody's coming tonight." It had sounded like a warning at first, but now, lying in bed, I thought maybe it wasn't. Maybe